Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 182. Finding peace means making peace with what is. Well, welcome back to our month, which has been all about the special and sometimes very stressful time of year for many of us, the holiday season, and the ending of another year. I think it's a great time to take moments of reflection, like you're doing now as you're listening to this, and see what work we've done and what we aspire to do in the coming year. Last week, I said the hope is in the work. The work we will focus on today is the connected boundary, detachment, grief work we either are doing or need to do so we can heal and come to acceptance of the realities of our life. As we talked about last week, making real changes changes your life. But we can't move the needle without healthy boundaries in our life. When you heal old wounds, you're no longer walking around wounded and hurting other people, hurting your relationships and yourself. I think that boundaries and grief work and detachment are all intertwined, and when we work on one, we have to work on the other two. And that's why we're going to talk about them today in terms of making peace and finding peace in your life. So just to revisit some of the boundary areas, we're just going to do a high level focus on this. If you need deeper work on boundaries, grab a counselor, grab a coach. Listen to the earlier episodes on boundaries so you can become acquainted with what we're talking about. It's a big concept. It's a very misunderstood concept too. One of the most obvious boundary areas are our physical, like your body, the space around you, items that belong to you, your space, your couch, your car, use of the kitchen at the moment. Healthy means your needs are respected for this space. Touch and items that belong to you, like your purse, your car, your phone, your stuff, are yours. People don't just grab your things without asking permission. It's a violation of your boundaries when others hurt you physically, intrude on your physical privacy, steal or ruin your things, borrow your car without asking. More subtly, they can feel like they can touch you, hug you, show up at your house, call 10 times in an hour, and it's okay. It's because they care, quote unquote. They can even make objectifying statements about your looks, your life, your decisions, maybe even leave their stuff all around the house and you're tripping over it. So those are some physical boundary areas. Not all of them, but those are the most basic ones. Other ones I don't think we talk about enough are the emotional boundaries, like your inside space, feeling safe and grounded, what you actually feel in the moment. That's no one else's business. Maybe feeling good about yourself, maybe being really angry at someone. Healthy looks like others accept and respect your emotional well-being. They also honor their own feelings, even if they're different from yours. There's differentiation there, that healthy detachment. It's a violation when you're being yelled at, verbally attacked, accused. People share your information, your secrets. You're told you don't feel or need that. You're talked out of your emotional reality. You're gaslit. You're shamed. You're guilted. You're manipulated. Just like our emotional boundaries, we have our psychological boundaries as well. Like what you think, your insights, your choices, your beliefs. How you see yourself, how you see situations. The idea that your thoughts are even valid, your competency, your ability to do things, to solve problems, to figure it out. Healthy looks like other people respect your thoughts, They respect your needs, your sense of self, and your choices. They don't question your problem-solving skills, what you want to do and why. They let you decide what's best for you. They may tell you what they think about it, but that's about them. Unhealthy looks like you're told what to think, what to feel, need, or choose. Others tell you what your gifts and your passions are or what they should be. They redesign your reality in very subtle ways until you start questioning your own head. You feel confused, frustrated, often anxious. You doubt your thinking, and depression and panic attacks can set in. You start looking outside of yourself for a lot of validation and answers. Another boundary area is our time and our energy. This one we may not pay as much attention to, like your actual time, like during the day, like how much time you have to do something, your emotional and your physical energy spent on someone or something. Healthy looks like other people respect your time by being prompt, by following through on commitments to you. They don't get upset when you decide to cancel or change your mind. They may be disappointed, but they don't manipulate you. Unhealthy is you find yourself spending time and energy on other people's stuff, their issues. Others try to make you feel bad for opting out, for changing your mind, maybe spending some time on some self-care. Maybe you don't want to get involved. Families are famous for this. What do you mean you don't want to bail out your sister? You notice that you feel irritated, overwhelmed, and frustrated. So, when you work on healthy boundaries, you define where you end and others begin. You focus on what belongs to you and try to let go of what belongs to other people. We find peace by working on boundaries, even though there's that initial anxiety and guilt. Everybody's got to work through that. Know that that's going to be there. There's peace on the other side. And some of it is tangible, like someone else's stuff isn't all over your bedroom. Or you're not answering your phone because they're blowing it up with 15 text messages because they're pissed that you said no. There's peace because you have honored your own truth. What feels safe for you? What feels right for you? And that other people don't have a right to tell you what to think, feel, need, and do. So I think it lowers our anxiety. It helps us feel more grounded, more safe. We know we can begin to take care of ourselves and our relationships with other people. Not that it's going to be pretty, because the unhealthier the person on the other side, the funner it is to deal with their reactions to your boundaries, but they're not yours. Their reactions are theirs. The irony is, of course, if that was a healthier person on the other side of the equation, we wouldn't even have to talk about this, now would we? You'd be able to say, hey, can't help you. They're like, I understand, disappointed, but I completely respect your no. Because here's the deal. It's either we begin to say no and to detach with love and honor ourselves for we have to take responsibility for creating our own damn anxiety. We have to make a choice. Or I think our fear-based compulsive behaviors are going to keep us right where we are. We've talked about this before. There's two choices. One is to stand in your truth, honor your boundaries, let go of what other people are doing and not doing. Or people please, avoid confrontation, don't say what you really think, feel, and need. Don't say no. Say yes when you really don't want to do something. And that's going to make you anxious and resentful. Speaking of being out of control, the other part of boundary work is internal boundaries or self-discipline. We have worked on this many times on the show. We can always work on it some more. Or check in to see where we are. Like where we accept that reality of the fact that we only have 24/7. We don't get extra hours in a day or more days in the week than other people. And so we really do often create our own chaos. And chaos brings anxiety. What I mean by that is we put too much on our plate. We're trying to do too much in a day. We don't add in buffers of shit can happen. Things can take longer than we thought. We can run into obstacles. So when we have more discipline, we feel more grounded and we have healthier control. We don't say yes to something unless we know we pretty much can pull it off. And then we think about, how do I know that? What do I have going on today? If I say yes to her, is it likely that I'm going to be able to follow through and not be a stressed out person running around frustrated? When we work on self-discipline, we're not trying to do 5 things at once anymore. We're not running around trying to make everybody happy. We're learning to say no to chaos and yes to doing less and having some peace and some order. We work on letting go of what's unfinished and unresolved for today. We learn to prioritize and thus choose what must wait. And that is something I don't think people talk about enough. When you commit, there's a possibility that you're going to make the wrong choice. Like you may think that priority number 1 should be X and priority number 2 should be this other thing. Let's say you get there and you're wrong. Okay, so you learned. But a lot of people don't want to prioritize because they're afraid they're going to screw it up and do it wrong because they have so much shame and perfectionism. When we do self-discipline, when we set boundaries, we take the risk, we let the chips fall. But that is the only way we also show up and accept reality. I also think we don't trust ourselves enough. And I think if we spent more time, aka setting boundaries around some quiet time, we find we make more thoughtful decisions, not fear-based, anxiety-driven, half-assed. So we're learning to be okay with letting things wait or be let go of or let someone else do it, God forbid. Letting go of the outcome in trade for doing the right thing instead. So we're learning to finally trust ourselves more as we work on this. And that, people, can bring a lot of peacefulness and a lot of hope. Because if you start trusting yourself more, you're going to want to do more with your life because you trust yourself to make decent decisions, put things in order, live out your values. You can say no more. You can say yes to other good things. That's why boundaries are number 1. Boundaries are always first. Whenever we want to do any kind of work, we got to do the boundary work first. Okay, so once we defined where we end and others begin, we often have to let go of the outcome. We're not people-pleasing, we're not controlling, we're detaching, we're saying no, and we're not all blended and blurred with other people. It sounds awful, but we're not enmeshed. We're not overly involved. There's a continuum of this, of course, and only you get to decide where you lie on that continuum with people that you care about. But when we detach and step back a little bit, the grief work can happen. Now, I think one of the things we don't think about is that finding peace is all about making peace with what was, with what's happened, and what is. What we've done, what others have done to us. So we want to take some time to do what I call a boundaries reality acceptance retrospective. It's a long name for sitting with the truth. So a couple questions I want you to kind of think about as we go through the rest of the episode is, what kind of work have I done on boundaries this year? How's that been? And has it changed anything for me? Do I know what work is next in boundaries? And how do I feel about that? Am I scared? Am I apprehensive? Am I annoyed? Do I want to avoid it? Of course. If you didn't have any resistance, there'd be something wrong with you. Real work involves resistance. Wanting to let go and holding on by our fingernails to old chaotic behavior. Next question, what about self-discipline for you? What about self-discipline? What am I proud of having started around that? What did I maintain this year? Even if it was just one thing and it feels really good. Where do I still struggle? And what would be wonderful to change, knowing nothing is too small to do? So in the coming year, 2023, what are some things I want to work on? And finally, what or who has been hard to detach from and why? So what or who, what situation, what outcome has been hard to let go of and take your hands off of? And why? What who, what loved one have you realized that you have no control over, no influence? They're going to do what they're going to do. So those are just some things to think about. So here's the other part of making peace. Coming to acceptance usually involves some amount of letting go, sometimes a lot of letting go, and so therefore doing the grief work. I think this is an area that can be really misunderstood outside of like grieving a person or losing a pet. So let's talk about maybe some things we need to grieve that we may not think about. Now, the most obvious one is death, and the actual loss is loss of what that person was to me. Like maybe their protection, their love, their security, their connection as a family member, their companionship, their friendship. I had someone to belong to. The next kind of loss is a traumatic event, and we're going to get more into trauma next episode. But a loss of security, what I thought the world was. The loss of who I am and what I can trust now. A lot of people don't recognize abuse, whether it's physical or emotional or psychological abuse in a relationship, can translate into a loss of who I am, like my boundaries. The loss of being able to trust others, to be able to trust myself. If you were growing up, it was that you were going to be allowed to be a kid. You can't. When you're abused, you can't. You can't be innocent, you can't be relaxed, you can't be silly, and you can't be vulnerable. Another loss is not finishing something. That's something we may not think about. But when we don't finish something, it could lead to lost opportunities. Definitely a blow to our self-esteem, because that's something we told ourselves we were going to do, and we let ourselves down. A loss of self-confidence and trust in yourself. So when we don't finish things, we hurt ourselves and we lose. And we have to grieve that, have compassion, and then decide what we want to do differently later. The loss of a relationship. We lose what could have been, maybe whatever part of our identity that was in this relationship, and maybe the dream we had with them, whether it was a friendship, a partner, a work relationship, a business partnership, maybe your family, maybe a family member you have to detach from and let go of. You got to grieve the dream of having a great relationship with your sister or your mom or your uncle or your dad or your little brother. Losing material things. Now, this is on a continuum, but maybe if someone had a house fire or a theft or something happened, the loss is that we could feel secure and count on things to be there that we need. When there's an unavailable parent, emotionally unavailable is what I mean. A lot of people don't realize, but you lost the mirroring back of who you are, the protection, the love, the guidance, the connection, the trust, and the hope that things could be okay. The other thing you could lose is the teaching. When a parent's not available, they're not going to take the time and the patience to teach you things and to share those moments with you. Like maybe it isn't a basic skill. Maybe dad was teaching you how to change a tire, or mom was teaching you how to cook. Loss of a child via abortion. A lot of women don't talk about that. But loss of the child they could have had. For some people, it's been self-respect. Maybe it went against their values, their religion, what their family thought. So there's a lot of loss there that I don't think women get enough love and support around. What about faith or belief system? What if you walk away from a faith perspective that you grew up with, and now you're left with kind of an abyss? It's like, now what? And what for? A lot of people struggle with a sense of purpose. Like they had these guiding principles that were taught to them and what they grew up with. Now they have to redefine them. And finally, the loss of what I thought would be. These expectations that we have, grandiose or realistic, it doesn't really matter. But then there's a loss of security in that, and how I viewed the world, how I viewed myself in the world. You get what I mean. So those are some different losses that you may or may not have experienced this past year or in the past couple of years. I encourage you to give it some thought and see, do any of those apply? And let yourself have your feelings around that. Maybe look at ways you were avoiding grieving that stuff. And then see, are there any areas you want to do some grief work and some healing work in? Okay. So when we talk about grief work, I don't want to assume everyone's on the same page in terms of what I mean. Kubler-Ross came up with the stages of grief, and they're not linear, but they're helpful. Usually you're toggling between 1 and 2 at a time. The first one is denial, which stands for, I don't even know I am lying. In other words, this can't be happening to me, not to me, not to me. Denial is usually our first but temporary defense against reality. It's a big no or hell no. We're in shock. It can't be true. We push it away. We don't want it to be true. And if you have an awful thing that happens, that's understandable. We can have denial about a lot of things, even our own stuff. When we come out of denial and take our head out of our butt, we often come into some anger. You're like, wait a minute. This is not okay. I'm pissed. Why me? It's not fair. Who can I blame, right? Who can I blame? We're mad. We don't like it. We're restless. We're hitting the wall. We're bitching about it. We're talking about it constantly. We don't like the reality. And that's actually pretty helpful. I have sat with so many people who never let themselves get angry, and therefore they can't do the real grief work. It ain't real, people, until you feel it. Don't go from denial to forgiveness and everything's fine. That just leaves you with a bunch of unresolved grief that's going to cause big problems. Whatever we don't work through and grieve through is running our life, remember? So we usually flip back and forth between anger and the next stage, which is bargaining. The what ifs, the if onlys. I'll do anything for a few more years. Maybe if I'm nicer to him, he won't scream at me. Trying to make things unhappen by changing something. So we're trying to make a deal with reality as opposed to accepting it. When we are exhausted from going back and forth between anger and bargaining and anger and bargaining, here comes the white flag, and that's depression. A lot of sadness sets in. Resignation, what's the point? Feeling blah, feeling yuck, wanting to stay inside, not having a lot of motivation. It's not clinical depression, it's grief depression. There's a difference. And finally, one day you wake up and there's some peace. There's some acceptance. It's going to be okay. I can't fight it. I may as well prepare for it. I'm trying to live with it. So that kind of thing. Peace is what peace means to you. Forgiveness, I think, often comes as an organic byproduct of this stage, and I don't think we can forgive until we're ready, and I don't think we should force it. I think it's better to allow it. Because forgiveness comes in a sense where you do have peace. You're not fighting it anymore. You're not wrapped around the axle around what that person did. You've worked through all the vulnerable around it. So There are what I call 5 challenges of grieving. And I know other people have talked about this too, but these are the ones that I thought were helpful. So there's a challenge, what it looks like, and why this is hard. The first challenge is obvious. Face the reality of a loss. We can't change it. We can't get it back. Life might not ever be the same. We will never be the same. We can deny the truth and we can bargain all we want, yet it is what it is. Why is this so hard? Because it means we have to surrender. We have to be vulnerable. We have to give up control, and we don't like that. It means maybe we have to change and face the unknown. For some of us, it means sitting with even deeper levels of loss, and that's a whole nother separate conversation. But those of you who have started unwrapping the box, you know what I'm talking about. Because if you have to face this thing on the surface, it means you're going to have to sit and open up a whole can of stuff that you probably don't want to look at. The next challenge is you have to open yourself up to the pain, which means you have to allow yourself to feel it, express it. You have to allow others to validate what you're feeling and that it makes sense and you're not crazy. You have to know that that feeling will not kill you even though it feels like it might. And you express it, you journal, you hit the pillow, and you let it go. This is hard because it's hard to trust and know that you can withstand it, that the big abyss is not going to suck you in. It's hard because you may not have safe people around you to let you grieve, and we need safe, strong people around us. Maybe you were never taught how to grieve. It's too vulnerable and way too scary. As a kid, you were supposed to have healthy enough grown-ups that let you just fall apart when you fell down and hurt your knee, when you were upset about something that happened at school, when you were disappointed in yourself, when your best friend moved away, and they validated that you were hurt and scared and angry, and that was okay. The third challenge of grieving that a lot of people don't talk about is now you have to think about how you look at the world and maybe revise that. Especially when you've had your first big loss and now you realize life is not fair. We do lose people. Bad things do happen. People are going to let us down. Maybe we made poor choices. And that's hard because what if that leaves you without hope? What about the big picture? What about your spiritual beliefs? What about thinking differently, believing differently? These are big paradigm shifts for people. So we have to look at our assumptions of ourselves, of the world, of other people, of life. You can't do that overnight. The fourth thing we have to do is reconstruct our relationship to what we lost. In other words, what was done to you does not make you bad. You can find surrogate people like a mom, a brother, a sister to meet your emotional needs, even if family of origin couldn't do that. You'll be okay even though this happened. You'll have scars, but you'll be better for them, kind of thing. This is hard because we have to let go of the dream, that perfect dream we had, of that person, of that situation. It might mean we have to open up and trust new people. We have to grieve that too. What if we have to start trusting ourselves? What if that is too scary? What if we feel too alone, too inept, too whatever? And finally, the fifth challenge is reinventing yourself. Finding meaning in all that you have lost, for example. Looking at your strengths and your gifts, teasing out the good from the bad, learning to be grateful for what that experience has taught you. And in terms of learning how to do it different, and finding your sense of purpose from what has happened. This is hard because now you have to take responsibility for your own happiness. You got to break down and actually believe in something greater than yourself, perhaps. For some people, that's very difficult. And even scarier, risk owning and using your gifts. I mean, what happens if you fall on your face? So reinventing yourself. Doing the grief work. Learning to let go. Learning to look at yourself and life differently. That is why this work is so life-changing. But that is also why that's what brings the hope and the peace. And as you can see, you can't work on detaching without working on healthy boundaries. And you can't work on boundaries and detaching without having to grieve some things that you wished were different. So today we process the concepts of how grief work, detachment, and boundaries all work together like three legs of a stool to help us sit with, face, and feel what is and what has been true for us, and maybe what we need to come to acceptance around. We focused on the many types of losses we might not be familiar with, and thus may not even realize we need to grieve. I think this is such important, vulnerable work, and it opens the door to more healing, more hope, and more peace. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you walked away with some perspective that will be helpful for you this month. Be sure to check the show notes at ownitpowercast.com and grab the newsletter if you don't already get it. I don't send you a whole bunch of other stuff. Everything comes on Tuesday. All right, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.